haven't used it myself. But if they claim to do what they do, or what they say, if they do what they claim to do, I think it seems like a viable option, especially for things like looking for anomalies like backdoors, things of that nature in code. But also, again, we're talking a lot about applications which aren't just off the shelf in this case, where you don't have access to source code. I think, given that you do have access to source code, and I know Vericode's pitch is it's even better even though you have access to source code, but I would beg to differ just a little bit. If I have access to source code, it'll be hard to convince me not to go through it to identify bad things.
Anybody else?
If you're buying a piece of software, you've had it developed, and it has a failure, do you not expect that company to fix it? And if so, then where do you differentiate the type of problem that the software has, and why the buyer of the software should have to incur additional costs for a piece of quality software?
Are we talking about commercial off-the-shelf software or custom developed?
Either way.
Well, I guess there's a slight difference in my mind, because if it's COTS, then it's different, because you kind of have to accept whatever the services agreements, or you have to accept whatever they have as accepted use agreements, and you just purchase it off the shelf and you go from there. But I think when it's custom developed applications where you're saying you are the owner of the source code. Going back to what I said, if it's a gray area, but you need to define at least the basic minimum level of security vulnerabilities to differentiate between, hey, this is a security vulnerability versus this is a software bug that got introduced in code unintentionally for just performance-related bug, but also translated into a security issue. There's a difference between those two to at least filter out the blatant security vulnerabilities, and I think that's where I would tell most clients to draw a line and say, at least let's get the application 90% secure. That 10%, you're probably never going to be able to say it's 100% secure.
Anybody else? I have a question.
Sure.
Ted Strain, Media Archives. Where do you see the future, like in 5, 10, 20 years from now? Do you think the black hats are going to win? Do you think, because I've heard people like not so certain that in 10 years from now, not everybody's going to have worm. There's going to be no protection because they're staying ahead of the curve. The white hats are trying to catch up with them, but they're always trying to get in ahead of us. So what's your take on that?
Well, I'll answer that question based on my personal incident response experience. And did you just say, are black hats going to win? They are winning, unfortunately. They're definitely well ahead of the curve. Everyone gets a false sense of security. Oh, I have updated antivirus software running on my system. Well, yeah, it doesn't really matter. It was packed software that went right through that. People are investing millions of dollars worth of technology to protect their crown jewels, so as to say. Black hats are still breaking in. How are they doing that? I don't know. Targeted phishing attacks. Bypassing antivirus, have malware that's smarter than you think. In my opinion, unfortunately, from over the last 2 or 3 years, at least, what I've noticed is I've seen organizations who dump a lot of money into security, but still getting compromised because black hats are ahead of the curve, unfortunately. And it's a catch-up game for folks like us.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just curious, do you feel like the development community offshore actually has the skill set to code secure applications, and they just don't because of performance and cost constraints? I mean, as a consumer of offshore development, is it reasonable to expect that that's a capability that they have, and if I come back to them, after having looked at the first draft of the code or what have you, and identified 10 issues, are they capable of solving those problems?
Right. So I guess in terms of the skills of the folks, and again, like I said, I know a lot in India, so I can kind of talk based on that experience of mine. What I see is obviously like any other business, their skill sets are tailored to what their clients want. And unfortunately, there hasn't been a big push on security from clients in the US, or the UK, or Australia, what have you. So there are very sharp, smart developers out there, and it's just that those skills haven't been developed because they haven't been viewed as a necessity. If the push comes from here, they'll be up to the mark shortly, because it's a competitive world out there. There's so many of these offshore shops that they just want to battle each other. So if you say, hey, what I'm looking for is this basic minimum level of security, they're going to push for it. So I think the capability exists. It's just that it's not being tapped into, or they're not being made aware or educated enough.
Okay, anybody else? Got time for one more. Comment.
Yeah, since we do have an offshore shop, we are working with many large companies, and this is to answer the question here. Even the Owasp India chapter has been started. We had a similar event there, which was again promoted by companies who are in the services industry to get the same amount of influence there. And we are running COEs in many companies, not just us, in many companies running security COEs, doing security code reviews, incorporating in the SDLC, and we're doing it for Fortune 5 companies. So it's not that it's not happening right now, but it does cost more, because these developers, again, as there is a shortage here, there is a huge shortage there as well. So if you need to pay somebody 3 times the salary that a regular Java developer costs, you want to make sure that you're getting paid back for them. That's all there is to it. But there are enough people there right now who have this capability and provide full-blown. In fact, we are also currently using the ASAPI framework. We are heavily involved with identity access, single sign-on, role-based authorization capability, integrating that. So it's a skill you can find across many Indian companies, not just ours.
Okay, great. I guess that's about it. Thanks.
All right, thanks.
And once again, you can go to owasp.ai.